Hi there and welcome to this edition of Totem Talks. Today we're going to be talking about thought leadership and law firms. With me I have Ben Girdleston, who is Associate Director at Headland. Hi Ben.
Hi Gary.
Could you please explain what Headland do and what you particularly do at Headland?
Sure. Headland is a financial and corporate communications consultancy. We're based in London. We act for a range of clients, from professional services firms and law firms to listed clients, private equity,
Yep.
banks, wealth managers, etc.
And I of course know your background well, but
Yeah.
for the people watching, your history in law firm, could you just run through that for me?
Sure. Okay. So I've had senior communications roles in a number of firms. So I was at Ashurst for nearly 5 years, where I was a PR manager there. And then I moved on to Field Fisher Waterhouse and Bird & Bird, where I had broader communications roles in each of those firms.
Okay.
I joined Headland in March 2010, so I've been there 3.5 years.
Okay. So the whole area of thought leadership, do law firms do thought leadership and do they do it well?
Well, the answer to the first bit of the question is yes. Do they do it well? I would say sometimes it's a bit patchy. I think the big challenge for law firms is actually to do thought leadership consistently well.
Okay, what do you mean?
I think there's an increasing realization from law firms that they are valid business commentators in the same way that investment banks are, or accountancy firms, etc. They're slowly beginning to understand that their voices deserve to be heard in terms of big business issues. I think that's magnified recently because of the onset of increased regulation.
Yeah.
The fact that regulation is playing such a huge role in everything, from obviously contentious, litigious things, but also in M&A and the world of finance, etc. It's such a huge part of everything, really, that we all do. That lawyers are at the centre of that, and I think that they are increasingly realise that they have the right to be heard. And actually, crucially, both clients and journalists need to hear more from law firms. So I think there's a slow realisation that is the reality of the situation. But firms are perhaps being a little bit slow in really attacking that and putting out good content regularly.
And are we talking about law firms being behind the big four consultancy firms? Are they stealing a march here in this area?
I don't know about stealing a march. I mean, even if I go back 10 years or so, when I was at Ashurst, we always felt that the big four accountancy firms were doing it well, and they were. They have, pumped out, for want of a better expression, really good content, really strong pieces of thought leadership for years. They've obviously got big budgets, and frankly, bigger budgets than most firms have. But I think the whole legal sector has always viewed the big four accountants as people that are doing it really, really well, both from a client perspective, but also from a media perspective as well.
So what's stopping law firms doing this? Is it their intrinsic cautiousness? Is it just alien to them?
I think there is a little bit of that, but I think there's a more practical and fundamental issue, and that is that law firms generally do things by consensus.
Okay.
And the problem with that is twofold. One, you end up with a product that's a bit vanilla, because too many stakeholders from too many different parts of the firm want to say and want a kind of piece of the action. And two, it's just too slow from beginning to end. And by the time the piece of thought leadership is ready, be it on M&A or anything else, things have moved on and the news agenda has moved on, both from a client perspective but also a journalist perspective.
So how quick do you need to be? Are we talking about seeing something on the news in the morning and that day being able to be on the news in the evening or in the paper that evening?
It really depends on how you define thought leadership. To many people, myself included, that can include just a quick reaction to a story on the news. So for example, at the moment, everybody is looking at the US shutdown situation and really wondering where it will go. Yeah. And an effective piece of thought leadership around that, in my opinion, could be just something that moves the story on. Okay. So for example, if you feel that actually what's happening there isn't going to be too damaging in the long term because of X or Y, then you say that to a journalist and it moves the story on. And that, in many people's eyes, is thought leadership, and that's fine. But I think really what we're talking about today is proprietary content. So research-based information that you generate and own, so news that you generate. And I think this is what I'm talking about in terms of pace. It can just take too long. You need to be able to do it, in a matter of certainly weeks. Because if you don't, then you've got two issues. One, the people that you research may have changed their minds by the time the report comes out. And two, the news agenda just may have moved on. So you've really got to look at weeks rather than months.
And who would you say are best at this? All across professional, financial. I mean, who's best at thought leadership out there?
I do think the big four are. I think there's a slight danger from a media perspective that there's a bit of saturation. So if you look at the big four, the amount of content and good content they pump out is absolutely vast. But I think if you put that point to them, they'd say, well, that's fine from a media perspective, but really what we're trying to do is help our clients view their industries in ways that they haven't yet thought of. So we're telling our clients something new, which is going to help them from a business perspective, and the big four do that fantastically. And certainly law firms have got every right to do the same thing.
And sometimes I see, say, a lawyer from a certain law firm on the television, and they're asked to give a comment on something. Now, just that appearance is not going to make a huge difference, but are we talking about that law firm being seen consistently in the news and the press, and there's a drip feed effect that they're perceived as the firm to go to?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there is a tendency within firms to think we really need to raise our profile by doing some thought leadership, and we'll cure all the kind of issues around our own profile with one hit. We'll do one great big M&A project or something, and then we're done. We can forget about it for another year. The problem is, as you say, it is drip feed. It's the same. You only have to look at the discipline of advertising to learn from that. If you're on the tube, if you see an advert, it takes about 3 or 4 viewings of that advert, at your station or wherever else for it actually to register what's been sold to you. And actually, thought leadership and law firm profile raising is exactly the same. One comment in the FT is not going to cut it. You're not going to suddenly be,
people on the phone,
a world-renowned lawyer overnight. It has to be a kind of drip feed. So you see, certain people are across the news agenda all the time, and that's where firms really need to get to. So it needs to be a consistent push rather than kind of sporadic bursts of activity.
So is that your sort of one message to law firms if they want to focus this area to have a consistent themed approach over a period of time?
2 points I'd want to make. The first one is, yes, profile raising is important, and you need to be doing it consistently to achieve critical mass. And two, do it at pace. The world isn't going to wait for your own agenda and your own timekeeping and your own project management. You have to fit in with with the way the outside world is moving, both from a client perspective and from a media perspective.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks a lot, Ben. Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.
That's it for this edition of Totem Talks. Thank you.